I've already covered how Operation Raccoon City was a game that fonded nostalgia for early Resident Evil in ways that could have been received better, and how ResidentEvilRequiem finally managed to strike a balance between fighting for the days of old and actually being a playable video game. But just when I thought I was ready to put a bow on ORC, a viewer pointed out that this game didn't just get DLC in the form of weapons and skins. They legitimately had the gall to charge money for palette swaps. But it got a whole ass campaign that's actually equally linked to the exploits of the Wolfpack. It's literally a second game, which would be great news if you didn't have to remind yourself that you were still playing Operation Raccoon City. So, did the DLC correct the mistakes of the base game and deliver a game that actually felt fun to play?
You serious?
Or was it just more of the same? Time to find out. Like the base game, you're allowed to select your character and their loadout, with only minimal differences between XR6 and the Wolfpack in how they function. And once you're done, we're off to the races. Straight away, you'll find we're in the thick of it, with Crimson Heads barreling towards us with murderous intent, reminding us that once again, DLC in this era was always built with a solid difficulty spike ready and winning for those seasoned players ready to cough up a few bones for another hit of the ORC high. We get some enemy haste straight away, like erecting back haste to stem the flow of the undead. Before Carlos from Resident Evil 3 makes a cameo to let us know that the nostalgia train has officially left the station. From there, it's much more standard fare. Fighting off waves of zombies and UBCS forces as we make a play for City Hall to stop those umbrella meanies from city aiming more bombs and being generally nefarious. If you saw my previous video on Operation Raccoon City, you'll know I took the game to task for the weapons feeling much too similar. Well, that was because I hadn't tried the shotguns. And dear God, I really wish I hadn't. I died repeatedly in this section again and again, because it turns out shotguns are worthless return heat anything that isn't already sit on trying to violate your personal space. Which means trying to take out and trace snipers with one is absolutely putting your head in a noose. Worse, the game doesn't offer you any alternatives except for your backup pistol, meaning that you are in for a whirl of hurt if you decide to try and push through instead of retreating to the mission select screen and try again. From there, we're back in familiar territory. We already did this level in the main campaign, except now it's defusing bombs while fighting off more UBCS troops. They throw in a new commander enemy type whose claim to fame is being a palette swap of a regular trooper along with having far more health. But aside from that, there's very little that's noteworthy about them. Remember the liquor room for the main campaign? Well, it's back! Yeah, we're playing all the hits. Except now, apparently, you have to defuse bombs before you leave. I'd say it's riveting stuff, but I think we both know that's not true. Make it through that, and you'll find some blueprints for a hidden underground base Umbrella has looking beneath the city, presumably before Wolfpack has a chance to destroy the evidence of the main story. But none of that matters since it's mission complete. And we're on to the next exciting entry in the legacy of Echo 6. Sorry, no, wait, my bad. They never get mentioned again in Resident Evil lore. We're back to PowerPoint briefings for Mission 2, telling us to get our asses down to the Umbrella base to dig up more salacious evidence of Umbrella's wrongdoings. But, wouldn't you know it, that task causes our path to cross once more with Callus and Jill, who are at the clock tower facing off a Nemi after he shut down their ride. We valiantly offer to fight off the Nemesis, buying Carlos the time he needs to escape with an unconscious Miss Valentine. Now, despite Echo6's apparent enthusiasm to take Nemi to Pound Town, you'd be mistaken for thinking we actually need to fight him. Instead, there's a sneaky pop-up telling you to use Nemi's rockets to destroy the main gate so he can escape. Which, if you missed it like me, means you spend the next 30 minutes feeding Nemi a crate of ammunition. All the while wondering why the devs gave him so much health. Escape from there, we're into a sewer level. Selling off more waves one dead and UBCS before we can lure Nemi into some kind of foundry area. From here, it's time for your first gimmick fight of the DLC. Luring Nemi into 3 separate areas, we can pour molten steel on him. Shoutouts to Terminator Salvation fans in the audience. I know I did lament in the previous video how our last encounter with the Nemesis boiled down to nothing more than a wave fight. So I'll give the devs props where it's due for actually trying to rub a couple of brain cells together to make a spark of creativity. I just wish trying to get him from one crucible to the next wasn't as much fun as herding cats. Do it 3 times and you'll put Nemi in timeout, wrapping up Mission 2. Mission 3 still has us on our way to that secret facility that Leon, Ada, and a small child were somehow able to break into with far less difficulty. Regardless, we're back into the sewers, facing off with you-know-who. And it's around this point that I noticed another contrast from my previous video. Ranking with the Wolfpack, animation always was an issue. something I was keen to highlight in my video. But here, I have to say I never really found myself wanting for bullets. This could be due to the fact I switched to one of the DLC weapons to see if that could make things a little bit more enjoyable. But general consensus from my stream chat was that the DLC was more forgiving with how far spaced out the ammunition was. I have to say being able to fight more freely without constantly keeping an eye on the ammo counter definitely made the grind from A to B more enjoyable. So kudos where it's due to the developers for clearly taking fan feedback on board when this was released. And it's in the sewers we're introduced to the big new mechanic of the DLC, flares.
If you truly love video games like I do, this moment is for all of us.
Several areas are submerged in pure darkness, and your only option is to toss out a flare if you want any chance of fighting off the undead, since somehow everyone forgot to bring flashlights in this nighttime operation. Plenty of flares lag around these sections, and while I'm not gonna pretend there isn't a pain to have to keep tossing them out to light your way, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the visual of being in a pitch black tunnel, lit only by the flare of one-night weapons as zombies launch themselves at you from the darkness, isn't pretty damn cinematic. Keep trudging through human waste and we'll bump into Claire, who is trying to find Sherry Birkin, who it seems has gone missing despite her watchful eye. Being the stand-up civil servants that we are, Echo 6 offers help with finding Sherry, since it's on our way to the secret lab anyway. It won't be long before we bump into the wayward child, and you need to let her away with flares since she's afraid of the dark. That's a pretty reasonable fear given how the dark is full of zombies. Another thing the DLC seems to have remedied from the main game is that you can no longer speedrun missions for the most part. Your objectives are usually locked behind events that need to be triggered, like this wave fight to protect Sherry. So trying to ignore objectives while you sprint to the end of level trigger is off the table. Honestly, I don't hate it. And again, it's nice to see the devs were tweaking things to the DLC to try and fix the game in the limited ways that they could. With wave fight done, we're due for another boss fight. This time with man himself, Willie B. Yep, Daddy's home, and he's not approving of Sherry's new friends. Carrying all those guns was really giving us the wrong kind of vibe. Which means it's time for our second gimmick fight. This one is much simpler than your tussle with Nemi. Just keep him in the middle of the platform with your conveniently placed flamethrowers to barbecue his booty. It does give me a little PTSD, making me remember the Ouroboros test subject from RE5. But it's much simpler, and before you know it, B-Man will eliminate himself from the torments. Yay! Mission 4 starts with, you guessed it, still try to get to the underground lab. That means more sewers, more Zambos, and more sections. You'll be tossing flares, a desperate attempt to light the way. We do encounter a few stationary turrets that will just delete you from the game if they see you, so you'll need to be careful with how you tiptoe around them. At this point, we've finally made it to the underground labs. So the resistance we're facing has definitely ratcheted up in terms of difficulty. You'll find yourself dying repeatedly, but at least the checkpoints are forgiving, so be thankful for small mercies. We found a tyrant who's in the process of being programmed to hunt down Sherry, and interrupt that process in a decision which will absolutely not come back to haunt us later. Self-lab self-destruct, and fight your way past legions of zombies and hunters to punch out on level 4. But not before getting treated to a cutscene where our decision not to put a bullet in the skull of a helpless Mr. X comes home to roost with a vengeance. Mission 5 as it's still chasing Sherry to the streets of Raccoon City, while also looking to put the boot into another umbrella facility known as the Dead Factory. Do they have puppies there? I bet it's puppies. We're back to recycling levels from the main game, fighting our way through the cemetery in reverse. And doing our best to stay alive as the challenge continues to ramp up. Make it to the Dead Factory, I could be charged with running a punishing gauntlet to disable defensive turret stationed at the end of it. This is where my decision to switch to the Infiltrator of Echo 6 started to pay dividends. While her stealth ability has limited efficacy up to this point, her ability to copy the appearance of UBCS troops and slip behind enemy lines actually proved to be highly advantageous, allowing me to skip what would have been no doubt a very painful gunfight, disable the turret, and bolts right to the area exit, rewarding the player for lateral thinking. Where is ORC and what have you done with it? From here, any positive feelings I had towards the game as developers are immediately erased by being thrown into another boss fight against two Mr. X's. Not sure why the devs decided to take what was arguably one of the worst parts of the main campaign and do a victory lap with it, but at least here there's far more room to try and maneuver, and you just need to stay alive while a familiar rail cannon peppers them with high-velocity rounds until the problem solves itself. When those two 6 feet deep, it's time for Mission 5. From here, we meet up with Leon and Sherry, with Command already salivating over the prospect of getting their hands on Sherry along with a sample of the G-Virus to prove Umbrella's wrongdoing. The mission will start you off in the rail yards, giving me horrible flashbacks to the final mission of the main campaign, while we give Leon cover by mowing down wave upon wave of Umbrella troops. The sentry guns are back in full effect here, meaning it was time for me to step up to the plate once more with my mimicry ability to slip behind enemy lines. The difference here is that the Umbrella troops seem to have left base camp without their survival instincts packed, meaning that they were perfectly fine with standing around while one of their own wiped out the squad in plain sight. I'm fairly certain this was a bug, since earlier encounters showed that they were far more eager to turn on me the moment I opened fire. But I will take any advantage I can get, so wiping out Umbrella's fire while dressed as Bob from Poker Night was fine by me. Make your way past that nonsense, you'll be greeted by a large open space surrounded by health and ammo crates that couldn't be screaming at Boss Arena any hotter if it was lit up on a billboard. It's here that tyrant friend from earlier returns, juiced up on head crab mutagen and ready to dance. I would love to say this is a creative boss fight that really embraces some of the D mechanics, but it's pretty standard stuff for Resident Evil. Shoot the glowing weak point for massive damage, dodge his attacks, don't get swarmed by the waves of zombies. That said, there's nothing this boss fight really does badly either. There's plenty of health and ammo scattered about, and the only real complaint I have is that the boss just has far too much health, making the whole encounter take several minutes longer than it should. But whittle his health down and you get a cool little hero moment with your character delivering the killing blow before Leon and Claire show up to set future events in motion. Hands up, who's ready for a well-earned break? Well, ho-ho, not so fast there, player one. There is another critical threat in Raccoon City that's just emerged, and Echo 6 is the only team capable of stopping it. And that's it. Roll credits. Yep, Slant 6 fished the DLC with sequel bait. And we all know how that turned out. Clearly, they hope to be able to continue the story in either future expansions or even a full-fledged sequel. And sadly, it was not to be. And you know what? It kinda sucks they didn't get that chance. I know I gave the base game a lot of grief for how it played, and I stand by those assertions. The combat was frustrating, repetitive, and in some cases so boring you just wanted to skip to the end of the level. But here, it feels like Slant 6 listened to the feedback and incorporated what changes they could to improve the experience. Ammunition is far more plentiful. There's less reliance on cover. A lot of areas are darker to try and give it more of a horror vibe. I don't have any hard evidence to say this was the case, but it does feel like enough of the DLC changed to give the missions a faster pace that didn't feel like the chore that the main game was. With more time and a better budget, Slant 6 might have been able to turn out the game that they planned from the beginning, instead of the rushed disaster that was the final product of ORC. But honestly, once I got settled in, I enjoyed my time with the DLC far more than the base game. It feels like we were close to greatness, but for one reason or another, the stars, get it, just couldn't align. But what do you think? Did the Echo 16 come close to redeeming Operation Raccoon City? Or am I just coping to try and heal the trauma the Wolfpack already inflicted on me? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you all very soon.